In this lab, we are going to create a small FHIR client. The client needs to connect to a server to be useful, and here we will use the test server provided by HAPI. The test server also has a web-based interface, and from the web-based interface we can choose which version of FHIR we want to use. In this case it will be the STU3, which is the most recent. We can access directly the base URL of the FHIR server, which expects to receive correct FHIR requests. So if we just access the base URL like this, it will fail as the server doesn't know what we are trying to do or which resource we are trying to access. We can build a query directly in the URL and, for instance, make a GET request to the patient resource, which will give us a correct response with a bundle or a list of all the patients in the database. This bundle will contain a set of entries, each entry corresponding to a patient resource with all of the relevant information for the patient. And we can see that there are many patients, but not all of them. We can see the first 20 entries, so it limits the number of results shown to 20, but it tells us in the beginning that there are many more results, so 10,000 of them. Building the queries in the URL bar isn't very user-friendly, so we are going to use the web interface. We can similarly get all the patients by not putting any research criteria. We can see that it does the same query as before, and we get the same response. We can also check that in that query and those queries and response using the developer tools in Google Chrome. So we have a way there of looking at the network traffic when we are using the browser. And if we try to access here the raw JSON response, we can check exactly what was sent to the server in the request header and what the response was. So we can see the URL requested. It was requested with the GET method, and we can see all of the header where we say which content type we are expecting, in this case JSON. And we can get the response, which is the same as before. Again, we can see here the first 20 entries, and if we click on one, we will get all of the information related to that patient. So this will be a read request on just one patient by ID. We can also add parameters to limit the results to certain criteria. Here we research all patients from the USA. And if we look this time at the request, we can see that the parameters have been added to the query. And if we click on one of the results, we will again have all of the information. We can look at it in the browser. We can in this like pretty view with the text formatted, or we can get again the raw JSON or the XML responses, which are all different way of presenting the same information. So we can look at it in a pre-formatted way, we can look at it in the XML version here, or look at it in the JSON version, which will be the versions used probably by most applications, so either the raw JSON or the raw XML. So every time it's the same information. If you want to update the information, we can again use the web interface to create a new query. So let's try to change the address of this patient. When we look here at the interface, we can see that we have all of the contents, which is the XML content for the patient. We can change it. and click on the update button to actually create the query. And here it will create an HTTP put query for that patient, and the put query will target a certain patient by ID and will contain a request body which has the entire XML file that will be used to replace the information of the patient in the database. The server responds with a message saying that the operation was successful, and if we reload the patient, we can check that the information has been correctly modified. Let's now look at the other resources. Just for instance, the diagnostic reports. In the same way as we did before with the patients, we can list all of the reports in the system by searching without putting any search criteria. And we can look at the response, and we can see that there are references there to from the report to the patient. So this is how the links are done in FHIR. And so if we search for one for resource, for instance, if we search all the reports for one patient, we can provide that reference as a search criterion and get the results. We can search by patient ID, and we will get all of the diagnostic reports concerning that patient. And you can also ask the server to send that referenced object together with the reports. So the response bundle will contain both the diagnostic report resources and the patient resources. So it's kind of in the same way as we would do in an SQL query with a join query. You can find that the patient is there as well. See that there are also other references to other resources in the diagnostic report. Here in this case there are references to the observation. So all of those resources can be linked together in different ways. So here each diagnostic report also has one observation. So here we can try to have a look at that observation to see what's in it. We are trying first to search by ID, and if we use the identifier, so the unique ID for particular observation, and try to search by that, we see that it does not work and that it doesn't give us any results. So we can just make the query in the URL using the read method here by directly putting the ID, and here we can indeed find the results. So we can access directly the resource, and we can in fact also get it from the interface, but by using the ID and not the identifier for the resource. This is because you can have multiple identifiers for one resource. So for instance, it could be identifiers for different hospitals for this different system, while the ID attribute is related to the ID in the FHIR server itself. So the observation resource has links to the patient, the encounter, and also contain some notes and comments. So let's now look at our client. The client has two search fields, one for getting a list of patients matching a name, and another for getting all the information from one patient by ID. So if we look at the code, we have in the view two attributes, the client itself and an array list containing the patients. So when we click on the search by name button, we'll call the client to get the array list of patients, to fill the array list of patients, and then we will give that list to the patient list model, which is an object that extends the abstract list model, and it can be linked to JList so that it displays the content on the list in the interface. So we can link the JList to the model, and whenever we update the model, it will update the view. So when we select a patient in the list, the value changed event is triggered. The event is triggered twice when we click on the list, when we press the mouse button and when we release it. We use the getValueIsAdjusting method to only execute the method once. Then we retrieve the selected index in the array list and fill the ID search field with the corresponding patient's ID. When we press the search by ID button, we again will call the client to get the patient. We call the FHIR client to get the patient by ID and by getting the ID from the text field. If no patient has been found, we put a note in the text area. So the patient info panel, which is the text area on the right. And if we did find a patient, we will format and write the information that we want to show in the interface. So let's now look at the client, and we'll follow what happens when we execute the code. First, we will try to search a patient by name. When we click on the button, it will call the search button action performed in the view. And this button will in turn call the client. The client, when it's initialized, creates a context which contains the URL of the server and the version of FHIR that is being used. And we can then build a query in that context where we search for a certain resource. In this case, it's the patient. And we'll search for this resource with certain criteria. We put here in the where. So we want here the patient which matches a certain name. It will return a bundle which will be a list of patients. And we can use this bundle to fill the array list object that our method returns. And so this is the object that will be linked to the JList through the list model. When we click on an element in the list, the value change method is called to fill the ID field in the form. So this is done with the value changed event. And if we click on the other search button, the client is called again, so the FHIR client is called. And this time we ask the client to perform a read operation on the server based on the patient ID. So those requests, the search request and the read request, are equivalent to those we made earlier with the web interface and directly using the URL. And the first would correspond to our request, where we put the name as a get parameter, so it would be calling the server for the patient resource with name equals whatever parameter we put the name. While the other one would be using the ID to directly reference the patient, and so only retrieve one patient at a time.